Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and this is part 4 of my series on Venus retrograde. Now, I decided to make a part 4 after originally only coming up with 3 episodes because I realized that it might be really fun for people to have a little run through of Venus through the houses, which you can use to plug into your own chart to see what topics Venus might be activating in your life between April and the beginning of August, while Venus is spending all of that time in Gemini. So I'm going to show you this on the screen and just run through some of the simple topics. I'm not going to do like a really full deep treatment here. I just want to give everyone a few good things to think about and watch for. So here's May 15th, right around the time that Venus is turning retrograde. Actually happens between the 13th and the 14th. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put Aries on the ascendant, and we're going to walk through all the whole sign house placements of Venus in the houses. And you can match this up if you use whole sign houses by virtue of what your rising sign is. If not, and you know the house position of Venus in your chart because you use a quadrant-based house form of division, you can simply apply the topics that I'm mentioning when we get to the house that Venus is in your chart via Placidus. If all of that was Greek to you, then just follow your rising sign, and this should give you the accurate information that you need. All right, so first of all, starting with Venus in Aries, or excuse me, Aries rising, we put Venus's retrograde in Gemini into the 3rd house. It's a place of siblings, neighbors, kind of your immediate environment and the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Siblings, oh, I already said siblings. Communication and relationships, especially important for Venus in the 3rd. Sometimes writing, learning, education. Also, of course, the topic of art or the arts and the mind could go together with Venus there. Also the topics of communication and relationships, maybe things going on with your siblings. So those would be a few things that come to mind with Venus in Gemini in the 3rd place. And that's if you're an Aries rising. So let's move it forward now, and we'll go just forward an hour or so. Put Taurus on the ascendant. Now, Venus is then going to land in your 2nd house. That's going to take you into the place of money and resources. So this Venus retrograde will focus on money and resources, but could also do so in a way that involves relationships somehow, or art, pleasure, the senses, beauty, women, sisters, that kind of all Venusian symbols. So you watch for that combination if you're a Taurus rising. Now let's move it forward again. Put Gemini on the ascendant. It's really a personal experience for you if you're of Gemini rising. Venus retrograde in the ascendant will have to do with kind of an existential situation where you might be reflecting upon your own nature, who am I, as well as appearances and images that you present to the world, and also possibly your health. Those are a few of the things you could notice if Venus is in the ascendant. And again, like all the other Venus placements, think about the overlap between things like art, beauty, love, romance, sexuality, and so forth along with it. Not be surprised for Gemini risings to realize, hey, you know what, I think I'm bisexual, or there's something about my sexual or gender expression in life that is changing somehow, or even aesthetic appearances. I'm going to get a new wardrobe. I mean, sometimes it's really simple stuff. It's not deeper identity issues, but the two are connected. Sometimes a change in identity means a change in style. Anyway, I think that's one of the more important ones. So I wanted to say a few more things about that if you're a Gemini rising. Now, if you're a Cancer rising, Venus is going to be in your 12th. That's the place of self-undoing. So you want to watch for any kind of self-destructive patterns coming up in relation to sex, pleasure, love, relationships, or friendships, especially around communication, gossip, deception, things like that in the 12th house that can come up. But otherwise, it's also kind of exploration of shadows in relationships in general right now, and maybe the history of relational or even sexual wounds in your life, and also some potential for there to be fallout with friends or lovers with Venus in the 12th. Doesn't have to be that way. It can be also a healthy healing dynamic potentially in the relationship, but probably visiting some of those darker themes that the 12th house often brings up. Remember, the 12th house was traditionally called the joy of Saturn. Now, when we go forward a little bit more, we're going to put Leo on the ascendant. So if you're a Leo rising, then Venus will retrograde in your 11th house, friends, groups, organizations, allies. And so you think about there being changes among groups or amongst your friends that are pretty significant, or within groups or organizations that you belong to, and just an evaluation of your social life in general. Again, potentially with the emphasis on things like you know, romantic relationships, love and beauty, women and things like that as well, or the arts even. Take it forward, we're going to put Virgo on the ascendant, which places your Venus retrograde in the 10th house of career. So you think about all things to do with your professional trajectory, and they might be changing or going through some kind of makeover right now, or the interlap or the overlap, I should say, between love and the workplace. So that's, you know, if you're a Virgo rising. And again, these are just quick hits meant to give you some general sense of where Venus's energy is being focused in your birth chart. You're a Libra rising, it's your 9th house, the place of the higher mind, learning, education, religion, long journeys. There's some changes there. There may be overlap with romantic relationships. Also, the 9th house is the place of law, um, cosmic law, as well as the laws of physics, as well as, you know, karmic law, as well as the legal system. So study of higher truths, higher laws, as well as foreign travel and religion in a general sense, religion or spirituality. So the focus may also overlap with lovers, friends, the topic of love and spirituality coming together, and so forth. Okay, so if we go forward from there and put Scorpio on the ascendant, Venus goes into the 8th house, which is a place of debt and death. Debt, death, and other people's money. Why do they all go together? Because each of us come into this lifetime with only one debt that we will be forced to pay, and that is our life, right? We all die someday. That's the ultimate debt that we all have, karmically speaking. And so the 8th house is related to both debt and deaths, both to taxation and penalties, as well as to the obligations that we have to other people, as in karmic debts, soul contracts, and that others have to us. So there can be a real, that can be a heavy thing. It can also be a good thing. Venus retrograde in the 8th can often involve good things coming to us, or circumstances changing in relation to other people's money, a spouse or lover's money, inheritance, and things like that. We can also change, I mean, Venus in the 8th can be very much about different kinds of dependency, healthy and unhealthy. And so exploration of those topics could come up as well. And these are just sort of quick, more psychological takes on the houses that I think everyone will be familiar with. There's a lot more that can be said about these houses, especially in ancient astrology. Now, when we move Sagittarius on the ascendant, well, Venus is just showing up straight up in your 7th house of relationships and marriage. So the emphasis is very much on marriage and relationships. But the 7th house is also a place of social intercourse in general. And so the public, your relationship to the public, the feedback that you're getting through friends and social interactions of all kinds, really important. But otherwise, it's more traditionally straight up, you know, Venus is the planetary signifier of love. 7th house has a relationship with the same topic. So a lot of emphasis on relationships for Sag risings. And then Capricorn. Capricorn rising puts Venus in the 6th. It's a place of hard work, disease, sickness, and also strife and conflict, accidents and misfortunes. But with Venus there in retrograde, sometimes there's going to be some kind of positive or fortunate turnaround or silver lining, which means it's that you get sick and then you realize you need to turn your life around, or you have an accident or a misfortune or a bill or something that comes up, but there's some silver lining, someone helps you out. So it's a place that we're dealing with setbacks and difficulties in the 6th house that are nagging, or we're working really hard and not necessarily getting recognized or paid as well as we should, or we're dealing with some degree of drudgery or conflict in relationships. And Venus in that place retrograde means that there will be a reexamination maybe of relationships, or some changes in relationships that are more difficult or challenging, but it could also represent the silver linings coming out of difficult, stressful, or hardworking dynamics right now. So that's if you're a Capricorn rising. Now, if we move this forward to Aquarius, then we're going to put Venus retrograding in the 5th house. That's children, that's creativity, that's the arts. 5th house was called the joy of Venus and was traditionally associated with anything that was pleasant or pleasing, recreational, but also just, it was called the house of good fortune. And so it's a place that really has everything to do with what we do for fun or pleasure. Like Venus naturally brings harmony, pleasure, and all manner of pleasant things. So Venus in that house relates us, is helping us focus on our relationship to pleasure and happiness, as well as things like children and pregnancy, creativity in the arts, and so forth. So that is Venus's retrograde in the 5th house will have you focusing on those questions and topics related to that. For example, what constitutes fun or joy or pleasure in my life? And am I sharing that with a partner, or do we have very different conflicting ideas about what brings happiness, as well as issues coming up with kids? So those are some of the things there. Now, if we move forward to the last sign, Pisces on the ascendant puts Venus retrograde in the 4th house of home, family, roots, property. So your living situation, your family karma, your parental karma, things related to the domestic sphere of life, or your roots, or anything related to your home environment. And that's where you're going to see the retrograde energy come up, and can bring in, again, the crossover themes of romance, love, sexuality, pleasure, the arts, women, etc., Venusian themes. So I would love to hear where Venus is in your chart right now, transiting according to what rising sign you are and the house placement of Venus. And tell me what you've already noticed, because by the time you're listening to this, Venus has been in Gemini for a while already and is preparing to retrograde. But this is going to be with us for a while. So maybe come back, revisit this video, and update us too with what's been happening. But otherwise, tell me how you're noticing Venus. Is it a Venus return for you right now? How is Venus in Gemini affecting you, and depending on the whole sign house and topics that we just covered? All right. Well, I hope that that was interesting. That was an add-on, by the way, that I got several requests for. And so I thought, okay, I'll make a 4th video. That'll be fun. All right. Well, I can't wait to hear from you guys, and I hope you're doing well. Take it easy.